first 6, look, the first one, identify all your targets, right? It's the ones sometimes we don't identify that are sometimes the most important, right? Why is that? Why don't we put certain names of people down on our list?
Prejudgments. Maybe judge them and say, well, this person wouldn't be interested in that.
Right.
So I don't know why you do that.
Right.
Some people do.
Yeah, and if you're putting people down on a list, you know, maybe a simple question would be, who do you know? Who do you know that's interested in doing what you're doing? Anyone else you hang out with, right? Or people that you know. So we've talked about 3 areas so far, 2 areas of the 3. The third one is natural laws. Natural laws govern every area of life. Those who know and follow the natural laws will see success and wealth. Those who don't, won't. It's very simple, right? Like Luminita said, it's really important to understand it. Look, interest rates are at 4%. You buy the house, move on, right? It's like, that's the solution, right? If you follow that process and stop shortchanging yourself along the way, you will see success. Natural laws are going to help bring all of this together in terms of attracting profitable clients. And to do that, we have Emily Nelson. Come on up, Emily.
I hate to speak. I'll just admit it. So I'm going to read my speech. I hope you'll accept my apology. Last month I talked about how I was having one of those days, you know, one of those days. I explained how an expressive will tell you all the details. A driver will simply plow through the day and maybe run over other people around them. An amiable will get out of the way of a person who's having that day, and an analytic will explain why it happened, what it means, and how to move beyond it. I talked about how DNA for Life can help us when we're having one of those days, and I talked about how thinking at a different level can help. The other day, I came across this in my house. It's really a cat toy. You know, you can kind of play with the cat. But it reminded me of fishing. One of the principles of DNA for Life is the fishing pole principle. This principle says many people will just put their pole in the pond and expect a fish right away. To really catch fish, we must be willing to put the pole in the pond a ton of times to see the success. If we just drop the line in once and expect to catch something, we're deceiving ourselves. When I was a kid, my family and I would go to the lake in Wisconsin with my grandparents for summer vacations, and we would fish. The goal was not a fun summer vacation, it was to put food on the table. We'd catch and clean these little bluegills, and we'd put them in paper milk cartons, which we'd fill with water, and then we'd freeze them, and the end result was this big block of ice that we would take home and thaw and fry up in the winter in Indiana. My grandfather would take my sister and my brother and myself out in the rowboat. We were all covered up with long sleeve shirts and sun hats for protection. And then he'd give us these giant cane poles and this can of really slimy earthworms. And we'd have to sit out there for what seemed like hours and watch this bobber and hope that a fish would come along and eat the worm. My grandfather saw us as profitable partners. He saw the lake and those noisy little squirming kids as a wall of opportunity, not a problem to overcome or deal with. Which brings us to principles 1 and 2, walls of opportunities and no problems, only opportunities. So fast forward a few years to high school age. We started going to a lake in Minnesota where the fishing was better and we used a boat with a motor. My dad would take my brother and sister and me out very early in the morning to cast for bass. We're hoping for larger fish using more powerful technology, but the goal was still the same, to put food on the table. We were living principle 6, good versus great. In Wisconsin, we had good fishing and accepted it until our grandparents sold their cottage. Now we had an opportunity for bigger fish, greater fishing, and bigger goals. But here's where our personalities came out. My brother, the analytic, would spend a lot of time in the boat questioning Dad where he was going. Should we go to the North Shore? Should we go over to the reed bed? What was the weather like? When had we last had sun? How warm was the water? When was it going to rain the next time? You see, all those things affect the way that fish are going to behave, and he would question and try to determine whether they were going to strike on the silver lure or the blue lure. He was living in Principle 9, the roller coaster mystery. That's where inconsistent actions produce inconsistent results. The weather was inconsistent, the bait was inconsistent, and so the catch was inconsistent. My sister, the amiable, would fish off the wrong side of the boat. Here we were, trolling along the shoreline, casting up into the shadows where the bass were just coming out of into the water in the early morning. She didn't want to worry that her line was going to get tangled up in somebody else's line, and so she'd go off the backside. She was using principles 5 and 1, thinking, not knowing, and again, walls of no problems, only opportunities. She was thinking, it's a big lake, there have to be fish everywhere. She didn't know how to think at a different level from the point of view of the bigger fish, and so she consistently caught just stinky little perch. Now, I like to cast creatively. Could I cast my lure just so to get it between those two lily pads? Could I, reel it back in fast and then slow and just kind of spook the fish maybe and surprise them into biting? I mean, can you guess my personality? It's creative, and then I'm telling you about it and analyzing it. My dad, on the other hand, he simply cast his lure up along the shoreline, and he'd reel it in, and he'd cast it out again. Time after time, he'd cast, and he'd reel it back in. He was always the best fisherman. He was living in principles 11 and 12, focus, and never quit. My dad was an optometrist. He was an entrepreneur and a small business owner. He was in practice for 53 years, retiring at age 83. He was very successful because he was disciplined and because he lived by those two principles. He was focused and he never quit. Every morning at 8 o'clock, he'd go to the local diner for a cup of coffee with the guys. That was his networking. At 9, he'd be in his office. That was his time blocking. He'd make those calls, he'd see those patients, he'd do the things he needed to do to grow his business, and he'd do them consistently. He also lived Principle 10, stewardship. The more we do for others, the more we gain. He took care of the vision of generations of families. Some of us think because we've been in business for a long time, we should be having success, but it goes back to that fishing pole principle. We just put our pole in the pond and expect to fish right away. However, we have to ask ourselves what principles we're living. To really catch fish, we must be willing to put the lure in the water a ton of times to see the success. We must use walls of opportunity to go over the wall, under the wall, around the wall, to the right, to the left, blow it up, tear it down. We must be aware of the roller coaster mystery and avoid inconsistent actions. We must overcome the weaknesses of our personalities and be disciplined enough to do the actions to produce the results. We must put in place a BOS, a business operating system, that allows us to examine our results, come up with a solution, and commit to implementing that solution. But mostly, we must never quit.
Wow.
Good thing she doesn't like the public speak, huh?
Yeah, she doesn't like public speaking at all.
I don't mind public writing.
Public writing. That's an interesting thought. If you don't like public speaking and you like public writing, you can just stand up and read. Right?
Sure.
That's okay, right? Look at box 12. This is the area that Emily had just talked about. Box 12. To the right of it, under DNA for Life, take a look at that segment. We need to see opportunities, how to get things done, why people do or do not do things. We need to think or understand how to accomplish anything in life. And thirdly, we need to do, to take action, to see success. And that's really what the DNA of life is about, right? It's seeing, it's thinking, and it's doing, right? So as you look at your biggest challenge in helping developing profitable clients, keep this in mind. And remember, this isn't the last time you can actually see this information. If you go to thevisionproject.net, thevisionproject.net, and you click on resources, and then you click on live events, you're going to see box 4. So take a look at box 4. This is what's going to appear on your computer screen. Now, do you see the orange button on the right-hand side? What does it say?
Video.
Video. Well, Mike, who's filming all of this, is doing a fantastic job. Jonathan, helping him out as well, right? They're putting this all together, going to put it together in segments, like what we covered today, and put it up on the website here several days from now. You can go back. You can go back 2 years right now and look at the videos. It's a free resource for you to actually build your business. We're committed to helping you do this. Why? Because together we really do accomplish more. Bringing tremendous value creates tremendously profitable clients. And that's what this is about. And you're going to see that. You're going to see how things come together. You'll see Dawn's segment. You'll see Emily's segment, John's segment. And you'll see last year's segment as well. These are resources for you. Please take advantage. And for those of you that are we streaming as well? We're still streaming, aren't we? Good. This is good. And if you have any questions, we're not ignoring you. You can call us at 630-386-5306 with any questions or comments. It's really important. This is for you as well. I think last time we had over 150, 200 people tune in. Look, go on to those segments. This is for all of us, right? And tell your friends about it.